I'd like to bring tonight's school board meeting to order. As soon as I find my agenda here. So first we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Yeah. Next I'll have a roll call. Mrs. Castle, I know you're over there somewhere.
Mr. Cunningham.
Here.
Mrs. Cunningham.
Here.
Dr. Drake.
Here.
Mr. Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Hipster.
Here.
Mrs. Hofkin.
Here.
Mrs. McGinnis.
Here.
Mr. McCarrick.
Here.
Ms. Pennypacker.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll have our introductions of staff. Let's see. We'll start with Kyle Summers since he's on the screen here. I'm looking at the screen. Our solicitor, Jim Roth, our IT. Who else is on there? We'll start with Dr. Roach, which is to my right, superintendent, and Andrea Farina over there in the corner, our assistant, Sandy Castle, our business manager. And who am I missing? Got everybody? Oh, and Doug Kenwood, our facilities director. So with that being said, does anyone know our kids on? Our reps? Thank you. It's been a long day.
Ethan's on.
Ethan and Enoch, or yeah.
Ethan's
hiding
on.
there? Okay.
Hi, Ethan.
Hi.
There he is. Hi. So
Hi,
move
thank
on
you.
to, thank you.
Yep, it's just me
Thank-
tonight because Enoch was at a basketball game. So,
Okay. All right. We'll be to you in a couple minutes.
all right, thank you.
So for board president's report, I think we're doing pretty well with hybrid. And I don't have a lot to say tonight because we feel like we were just together. I think we're in pretty good shape. So we'll be working on our Giza project, hopefully, and we have a lot of things to vote on today. So I will let it go and turn it over to Dr. Roach.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. I'm going to share my screen here quickly for a short report. Much too similar to what you shared. I think it feels like we've been here a lot meeting and having conversations and trying to communicate as best we can. So for today's report, superintendent report, a couple things. First, make sure we're clicking here. Here we go. Yesterday was Mrs. Cunningham's birthday, so we want to make sure that we celebrate that. Now, we won't sing or anything, but and as we were sitting here preparing for our meeting, I also learned that tomorrow is Ms. Pennypacker's birthday.
Happy birthday, Peg.
And then next week, the 22nd, is Dana's birthday. Did I miss anyone else?
Yeah, happy birthday,
miss
Dave.
anyone?
29th.
29th, I'm sorry. Okay.
29th birthday.
29th birthday. Okay, it is on the 22nd, though. It's
Yep,
the 29th
mine
birthday.
too. Mine too.
Okay, all right. I'll make sure that gets in the records, in the reports today. So happy birthday, and I want to move on from there. So a couple things that I want to share. A lot of time has been spent lately on snow calls and weather calls. I know some of us are all sick of the weather and getting up extra early to make decisions. I want to just kind of go over real quickly, the process, because I know that comes up from time to time, and sometimes people don't think or don't think of the process, that we do have a process that we follow, and that we do take as much time as we can, and we try to make the call as early as we can. We know that that's appreciated by everyone if we can make it the night before. But this winter has been very challenging. A lot of calls on the radar that said snow was coming and weather was coming, and it never did. So we want to make sure, I think we've really been trying to be cautious with making the right call. And I know prior to COVID-19 and decisions about hybrid, in-person, and virtual, these were the type of decisions that kept superintendents and facilities directors and transportation directors up at night. Not that they still do, but they're definitely a different level. So just wanted to go over that. Please know that every time there's a weather piece that we do get information sent to us about the weather, Obviously paying attention to the hype that's on the news and all the local information. I am involved in a local superintendent text group, phone call and text group to check in to see what's going on. That can happen a couple days out. It can happen the night before. It can happen the morning of at 4:30 in the morning, 4:45, to see what other people are doing or what certain areas are. So it spans actually Pottsgrove, Pottstown, Springford, Upper Perk, North Penn, Souderton, all the way down to Wissahickon, which is a different world from us sometimes, but that's in our group there, as well as the Western Center and North Monco as well. I may have missed one or two in there. PV is also in there, and Methacton, sorry. So it does spread a wide range there, but we do communicate and let each other know what's going on. Not that we have to follow, but sometimes helps to know what other people are doing in that conversation. Then the other group that I'm in, obviously, is with Mrs. Malone here in the office, Henry from Coventry, and Mr. Kenwood and I have become early 4:30 in the morning text friends 3 times this week, trying to do the best we can with those calls and make those things. So please know that we try to get it perfect every time. We do our best. We also know the importance of the in-person school at this time based upon this specific school year, and safety is still paramount in terms of making those decisions. So we've had 2 official snow days, the traditional snow days, no work, so to speak, and those are built into our calendar. We still have 1 left. I'm holding on to that until we get another bigger storm, so to speak, because we know that that's a time to go out and enjoy and all the family stuff, which is very valuable. And we have this year had 1 virtual day connected to that other snow day. So that's a new thing this year based upon being in the virtual environment. In the future, if that's not available, we did apply and do have those, what they're calling flexible instructional days or FID days. So that is also in our arsenal of opportunities. Today, we got to break out the 2-hour early dismissal, and I'm hoping to not have to use the 2-hour late, the 2-hour delay today. I don't want to use the early dismissal because that means snow is coming and things are happening while we have kids in school, but that's also there as well. Everyone's aware of those things. So we have 1 snow day left. I'm hoping to not have to use it, but it is there in the event of a bigger storm. I also want to hold on to that because I'm hearing next week and into the following week, we're hearing more ice storms coming. So if we get knocked out with trees down and power outages, that does not allow for smooth virtual instruction live. So that would be, if we may have to call virtual, and if we find out that we have groups of people that cannot participate, including staff, that they would be helpful there to have there, or another big snow day. And we will continue to try to use the virtual days. You see the calendar in April there because it's important, because in our calendar, we have 3 days built in. So there's 3 snow days. So if we have a 3rd snow day, the calendar will remain unchanged because those are in there. If we don't use it, we will revert a date back 1 day earlier in the calendar. But also in the calendar are 2 additional days, which are April 1st and April 5th, as additional snow days. So if we continue to use virtual days, we preserve spring break and don't have to touch that, which I know is a popular piece for everyone. If we need to use them, they would be April 1st would be the 4th snow day, quote unquote, and the 5th is the 5th snow day based upon the calendar. I'm highlighting that here because on the calendar that was approved on December 7th, which was different from the calendar that was approved in August, somehow those 2 dates got flipped. So we clarified that these were the dates that they're supposed to be. The 4th day is on the 1st, and the 5th day is on the 5th, just for clarity's sake. It has been updated and changed on the calendar based upon that, and just want to clarify that. So I don't know if there's any questions on the board about snow days. If you'd like to be included on our text exchange, we're happy to add you in. Because after it leaves me, it goes to a couple of team members here, and then we're off and hitting all the stations and getting the communication out. So we try to do our best, and we'll continue to make those calls as best we can. So, all right, if there's no questions. That's just some clarity on that. Next, I know everybody's waiting for this chart here that we're continuing to live by. And I think at some point in the past couple of weeks, we've kind of lost track of these numbers and these information on the cases and the positivity, which is still very relevant in what we're doing on a day-to-day basis or on a week-to-week basis with that. So the information is here. Don't forget, we're still in substantial. We've signed the attestation that we are going to follow the rules on that other chart that we've shown you many times, and we're continuing to do that. I know Dr. Farina will have a little update at the end of my report just on the progress that we're doing as a district. But I did want to share the most recent numbers, which are beginning to trend down. They're beginning to trend down, which is definitely positive. You can see kind of a snapshot from early November back down through where we are right now. And actually the 5-county area seems to be in a downward turn as well for numbers. So they that we are hearing from Dr. Arkush and from the Office of Public Health that don't get too excited, because we did have some days where we weren't able to test. So that could have an impact on the numbers, but the general consensus is the numbers are trending in the right direction for us to get a little lower in that moderate and area range moving forward. So we'll continue to monitor those. There's links on here when we post this presentation tomorrow to see both the state as well as the local metrics, and we'll continue to monitoring the metrics inside the county, inside our municipalities as well. Couple updates. So as you know, we are in week 4 of the hybrid model. I appreciate Mrs. Cunningham's saying we're doing well. We are doing, we're very proud of where we are so far. For some, it's not quick enough, but for others, it feels right. We're working out some kinks. We've got some challenges. We're learning along the way. We have some forms and some phone calls and some emails that are coming and the codes that are in Skyward. We're working on all that. We are doing our best to communicate that, and it is getting better. And I think people are beginning to feel more cautious. At the same time, Dr. Farina sent a note out to the staff that don't get too comfortable. Like, we still have to be vigilant. We still have to follow our process. We still have to do those things. So that's been very helpful. We are fielding lots of questions and concerns and trying to do our best to get back to, we are getting back to everyone and addressing those concerns, but it is a new environment for some. So, and we do ask you to continue to follow the screener, which I know Dr. Farina will talk about, but also the exclusion criteria and working through that. So I want to appreciate the hard work that our teachers are doing, that our principals are doing. Everyone is really going all in and trying to make this hybrid the best it can be, knowing some of the challenges that are there. It is not easy. I did voyeur into a faculty meeting yesterday, and I appreciated hearing the honest feedback that the teachers were talking about some of the challenges that are in the models that we're doing. We knew they were there. They're acknowledging that, and we need to be aware and see how we can best support them. So we'll continue on our trend with that. Next, a quick vaccine update, because I know we had many hopes of having our staff with the 1B category started by now. That was the initial thought we had. And then, as you know, there was a change to the 1A category. They expanded it to increase to a larger number of people in our county or across the state and the country. And that has hindered the movement into the 1B for our teachers. So that is definitely a frustration point from everyone, not just here in Upper Perk, but across the county and across the state. And that's not a frustration of who's getting it. It's just that it's really a supply issue. When I tell you that the county was getting multiple thousands of vaccines, well, they had to cancel the vaccine clinic in Montgomery County this week on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for first doses because they only got 1,000 in, and they had well more than that assigned. So hopefully they said someone's coming in today, which I don't know if they don't, they canceled them because they didn't have it on hand. But the numbers are staggering for that. And the 1B category, we still don't have a good handle on projections. I think what complicated this was a discussion in the news about Philadelphia partnering with CHOP. I talked to Dr. Rubin today in our superintendent meeting, and that's no different than what's going on in the county. It just was heightened with that. So there's no secret stockpile coming in for that group. They're still working through the normal means that we're all working through to get our vaccines. So I'm frustrated for our faculty and staff that have been waiting for that. And I know some of them were able to get that in that 1A expanded, and we're coming up on some actual second doses next week. So we're hoping that is going to go as smooth as it can for us with staff getting their second dose that qualified early on in this process. But that's just a frustration point. I did want to share a clip. It's a little cloudy here because I had expanded too large. This is coming from Dr. Arkush's webinar yesterday on February 10th, and you can see the challenges in that 1A expanded. It's over 250,000 people they think are still sitting out there that need vaccine that weren't there before when we felt we were on track for a better shot at the 1B. And as estimated vaccine, about 1,000 a day is not pulling numbers here. And you see the percentages on the right-hand side or well below where they are. But this, again, not as Montgomery County only, not necessarily just this state. There's something going on, and hopefully it'll be corrected as we move forward. So. And then finally, before I ask Dr. Farina to share a little bit, I just want to put it on the board's radar that we're in the planning stages and beginning conversations about spring athletics. So that is a conversation we've had with you with fall, with winter, and expect to do the exact same process for spring, not taking anything for granted, but presenting that information to you. So a quick timeline there. By next Friday, I've asked Mr. Kurzweg and Dr. Carpenter to have a revised spring health and safety plan that I'll put in the communication for you on Friday. The following Thursday, we'd like to do a presentation with Dr. Carpenter and Mr. Kurzweg to share information on what the plan is for the specific spring sports and anything that they've learned from this winter so far. And then because of the timeline of when The sports start, as you can see, March 22nd for the high school and March 29th for the middle school. We're hoping to have this for consideration on the board on the March 11th meeting, which gives enough time to prepare that if that is approved here at the board. I believe the conversation will also be, is there time the week of the 15th for any voluntary preseason workouts, but that'll be a part of the presentation coming up, but I did hear that today. So I want to just put it on your radar that we're going to follow the same process we followed the past 2 seasons and present the information and have those presentations and information to you in the upcoming weeks. So this time I'll pass over to Dr. Farina because I asked her to share a few things that are important for the board to hear and for the community to hear, but definitely better coming from her.
Great, thank you. So as Dr. Roach alluded to, we're 4 weeks into hybrid, and those have been 4 weeks where we've gotten a lot of feedback. We've had a lot of internal conversation with our nurses and our administrative team and our teachers. And there are some things that we have revised and communicated with the community. The first thing is the daily screener has been updated. What we observed over time is that families were doing the right thing and reporting a single symptom and then saying no. So they were failing the daily screener, but they did not meet the threshold for exclusion. So in some cases, what would happen is every screener that has failed, we call. So someone from our nurse's office calls that family to sort of inquire. And so the pattern, we meet weekly as a nurse team. And what they were seeing is that kids didn't need to fail the screener. And so we spent some time, we worked with Sharon Shipe to try and refine the screener to better describe. And so there are some symptoms that alone rise to exclusion, but by and large, it is still okay to have a headache if that is your only symptom, and so, fatigue, most teenagers feel fatigue. So, I think it's out of goodwill and parents trying to do the right thing and keeping the schools open. And so we just really wanted to try to refine this to give parents a better chance and kids a better chance to filling out the screener. The other thing we're starting to observe that was tripping our families up was that kids were returning from quarantine because of an exposure. They couldn't answer the second question. So it automatically kicked them right into a screener failure. So, we put the caveat that if you've just returned from exclusion, which could be 7 or 10 days, both are shorter than 14 days. So we wanted to help our families out with that. The other clarity that we've had to try to reaffirm with parents is that if you do rise to the first tier of exclusion, you are considered a probable positive until we have a differential diagnosis, until you have a negative COVID test. That has been very frustrating for families. We hear, well, I know my child doesn't have COVID, and we appreciate that. However, our health and safety plan, we have prescribed that we are going to follow the recommendations of Montgomery County. And so, those have been difficult conversations with families whose children demonstrate multiple or a single severe symptom, and we've had to exclude them. Returning from quarantine, we have a lot of families who go out and have gone out and have differential diagnosis. They've secured that, or they have a negative COVID test. They send it to us. There's no name on it. We don't know who it belongs to. And so that sort of delays the process. So we just ask families that if you are going to send us a COVID test, a lot of them come up on your phone. And I think that might be one of the issues. Just make sure that your child's name is on the test that you're sending in, because it does quite honestly delay the process for kids returning. Re-exposure, just today, there was some clarification from Montgomery County that we asked for in the superintendent meeting. There was some question about the re-quarantine of students who had already had COVID because of the multiple variants that are out there. At first, they were advising us that yes, we should re-quarantine students, even if they've already had COVID in that timeframe. They are now aligning with the CDC, and they said they do not need to re-quarantine within the 3 months. So that is something that we found out today. So I wanted to put that out. That changes the number of kids that are out for quarantine, truthfully. in a good way. So Dr. Roach, if you want to advance. So this past week, we sent communication out to the district. Antigen testing, the COVID-19, the Binex Now antigen test that you all got to experience, which was really fun, I know, as a board. We have just ended our third week of staff testing. We have about 200 participants district-wide staff. That is less than half, but we still feel good that we have parents or staff members participating from across the district. It is quick and easy, you saw it. Our next phase, which we rolled out last week, was symptomatic student testing. And we are really, really encouraging families to do this. This would be if a child has symptoms, right? And they go to the nurse, and let's say they have a cough and a congestion and a headache, which are two symptoms that would kick you into a tier of exclusion. We would like families to allow us to administer the antigen test right there with their consent, because then we don't have to quarantine them if they're negative. We could right then and there say it's not COVID related, and then we would treat it just as we normally would with a child who's sick. You can return when your symptoms subside without any further documentation. The advantage to our families is they don't have to go out and secure their own test somewhere else, likely at some sort of cost, or they don't have to wait multiple days to a free site. And we really only have to limit the quarantine to those who are positive. It helps us immediately contact trace too. So remember, the school closure recommendations, the closure is based not only on the number of positives, but how quickly you can quarantine everybody who is deemed a close contact. If we know right then and there that it's positive, we have a captive audience, because right now the hybrid blue or the hybrid gold kids are the kids that either came on the bus or played the sport, or so, you know, it really does present a very good solution to maintaining our schools as is and opening them up, you know, getting kids more regularly, not fearing that school closure. We do have the declaration open for parents. You have to go into Skyward and give us consent, and then you need to secure a QR code. And we've asked for our younger children to bring that code in, and the nurses will have a file so the kids don't have to remember them, and the older kids can just screenshot them and access them. I included the link. Many of you have those links because we showed you it before. It's quick and easy. And we just really, I can't say enough. I think the nurses and I would tell you that this would be a significant game changer in terms of the kids who need to be excluded, and what sort of impact COVID-19 has on our community and the operation of our schools. The next phase is high risk, and Dr. Roach talked about athletics, and this is one. I will say athletics is where we've seen a lot of exposure of COVID-19. I'll be very transparent about that. At the secondary level, I have made a phase 3 and made a recommendation that I would like to see athletes participate in antigen testing. I think it's the way to keep our teams open, to keep them playing, to encourage safety across our leagues. And so I do believe I have some supporters in that arena. I know the importance of sports and what that benefit is to kids. And I think this would just be an additional layer to protect our kids and the kids we compete against. So, you know, we would look to athletes. We also would look to some of our classes where staff needs to be closer than 6 feet regularly. We have some low incidence classes, and the staff is helping them hand over hand support, just some behavioral academic support. And we would seek to ask those parents if those kids specifically would like to participate in weekly assurance testing. And then there's other groups. You know, instrument playing has been something of concern in terms of, you know, what is coming out of a trumpet or a tuba. And so, you know, we have large concerts. And so how do we get closer to normal? And we do think if we could secure assurance testing on a weekly basis with those populations, we could say that they are COVID free. You know, and so we would proceed with some of those events, I'm going to air quote, as normal. And then the other consideration for antigen testing is if you are a non-household close contact, you have to go get an antigen test on day 5 if you want to return early. We're exploring the consideration of providing that test to kids on day 5 from the district so they can come back with us quicker. So those are all the benefits of antigen testing. You know, this is unknown territory. And, you know, I think the nurses and I have talked long and hard, and I think your administrators, this really is, it sort of sets that peace of mind. And, you know, I wrote in the community blast, it gets us moving in the pathway to normal. And I think that that's what everybody is seeking at this point. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any about that. Yeah.
So I have a question. So with two questions. Can you hear me all right? Okay. All right, it's weird in my head. Sorry, it's always weird in my head. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so the first question is, when you're talking about testing for antigens with the athletes, potentially, would you be thinking like once a week or like every day or how once a week?
Yeah, once a week.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right. I mean, that to me makes good sense. I mean, and the test is not that, I mean, we all did it here. It's not that hard.
Yep.
It's like, you know, stick it in the nose, rub it around a little bit. The other question is, if the kids fail the screener, you said the people are getting calls from the nurses. Is that going to be going forward? We're still going to be doing that?
So if we, if they fail a screener, what we've asked is for families to communicate with us, because it is acceptable. You know, for example, my own child, I've kept her home. She has migraines. That she has one symptom. But
Yeah.
if we see a failed screener and we don't get communication from families, we reach out to them.
Okay, cool.
We just wanted, we want to make sure we're covering all our bases and keeping everybody who's in our schools safe.
Okay. All
I
right.
know they are annoying. We're trying to work them out. They come automated to say, hey, don't forget, like you failed the screener. Let's talk about that. And then once the nurses resolve the situation, then we either continue quarantine or we say, okay, we'll see you in a couple of days when your son or daughter's feeling better.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you.
Mr. Elliott, one of the bumps I talked about earlier was, I think there was some confusion when we first started. There were students that were not expected in school that were filling out the screener. So again, those are some of the kinks we've tried to work out over the past couple of weeks to get that better. That if you're not expected in school, then you don't need to complete the screener, that type of thing, which lowers that on everyone for that. So, and then one thing, if I could add to what Dr. Farina was sharing, and I don't mean to bring up a topic that will get people excited, which will be great, is other conversations in our superintendent meeting with Dr. Akush has been about prom, has been about graduation. So their thoughts over there, trying to think about getting kids outside, thinking about the senior class, which didn't have a junior prom, and all those things. And ironically, antigen testing was brought up to help make that even better. Can we have a situation there, that, again, this is an idea, where the students are getting an antigen test 2 or 3 days before they attend prom, that type of thing, to make sure that everybody is healthy going and that type of thing. So anyway, things are popping. This has been great. Dr. Farina's done a fantastic job. I was told we were one of six districts in the county that has this in place now moving forward. People coming on site on board every week. But I know that I helped out on Wednesday with doing some administration of the testing, and the teachers and the staff that were in the building that I was at were just so thankful. This was great. Again, like you said, Mr. Elliott, in and out, 3-4 minutes, and peace of mind was huge. So it's been really a positive step forward, I think, and I think it's great that we can have this. The only thing I'm concerned about is when we have students that need to pass the screener to get to school before, if they don't feel well at school. It's not, I don't feel good, I'm going to go to school and get a test. That's the opposite. That's the opposite. So we want to make sure that
Don't do that.
that you're passing the screener because you pass the screener, and if you happen to be ill during the day, then that would be an option for that. So
Cool. Thank you.
Dr. Drake?
Yeah, I had a quick question. One for that, in the situation you mentioned, maybe there's a way to have the student get driven to school to get tested rather than go on the bus to avoid that. I don't know the logistics, but the reason I raised my hand was the question with the athletics. So is it possible to have that as a condition of participation in athletics, that the students are required to participate and the coaches as well? Because that's, over and above our standard school day. it's an extra activity and it's a privilege really. So is it possible to do that as part of the conditions of allowing it to, to move forward into spring sports?
Yeah, I know it's been discussed with the superintendent group. I'll defer to Mr. Summers in terms of the legality and or acceptability, if that is a parameter on that. So I don't know if he wants to chime in or get back to us.
I can take that. I have given the opinion that for athletics specifically, that a school district may require it as a condition of participation. Certainly, there are no court cases that have ever addressed that situation, given that this is a unique circumstance that we're in. But as you indicated, Dr. Drake, participation in extracurriculars is a privilege, is not a right. And we're dealing with a significant concern, obviously, and we still are, as Dr. Roach indicated earlier, in a county with substantial transmission. So under those circumstances, I do believe that a school district may, for extracurricular participation, require it as a condition of participation.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Dr. Roach, are you done? Good to go? Okay. All right, Ethan, you're up for our student representative board report.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. So just a brief report on being back in school in the hybrid model. Just my personal take on it, but I thought it was nice to have, a good form of social interaction again, and being back in the building was nice and something I think I took for granted compared to being in the house. And lunch is very different this year, 6 feet of social distancing, prepared lunches, and seating charts made in every class. But the staff did a good job with putting movies on the TVs, and I think the collective effort of everyone is not going unnoticed. So winter sports seasons proved to be pretty successful with only one brief team shutdown with basketball. And finally, the band and orchestra and choir winter concerts were recorded yesterday at the high school. So that concludes my report.
Thanks, Ethan. Next, we'll have our solicitor's report and Sunshine Act announcements. Kyle.
Thank you, Madam President. The board did meet virtually in an executive session on February 9th, 2021, for the purpose of discussing a confidential student matter and receiving information on, but not deliberating, 2 additional items. And the other piece of information just to share as part of the solicitor's report this evening is that we may see a fairly significant development in school law later in the spring when the United States Supreme Court will be hearing a case involving the Mahanoy Area School District. It's a BL, which are the initials of a student, versus Mahanoy Area School District. Some of you may have read about that in the news, but essentially it involved a cheerleader participating in an extracurricular activity who posted offensive, profane language on a social media app outside of school hours, but it referenced her participation in cheerleading. As a result of that, she was suspended, removed from the cheerleading team, and she then brought a lawsuit against the school district with the support of the American Civil Liberties Union, and a federal district court judge found in her favor and said that she was expressing her First Amendment free speech rights, and that she was not permitted to be removed from her extracurricular activity. The school district appealed that decision to the appellate court, in this case, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which also upheld the local, the district court's decision and said, again, that the school district did not have the authority to remove her for violating its extracurricular code of conduct. The school district then appealed that decision, and several weeks ago, the United States Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, which If you know anything about the Supreme Court, they receive thousands of requests to hear various disputes, and with very few exceptions, they have the ability to say no. They're not obligated to hear cases. They can just decline to hear them. So when they accept a case to be heard, it generally means there's a potential for a reversal of that decision. So later on in April, the Supreme Court will hear arguments in the case from the school district and from the student who was removed. The impact of the case is that it could have significant impact on the ability of a school to impose discipline for speech that occurs outside of school. That's the main question: is what rights do students have to not be disciplined for speech, perhaps on social media, perhaps through other means that occurs off of the school campus? And what are the boundaries of a school district's ability to impose discipline for that speech? So there have, since the 1960s, been about 4 cases that the Supreme Court has decided involving free speech. And each of those decisions has been significant in terms of the authority of our school administrators and what discipline they're able to administer in various circumstances. So as that case further develops and there are arguments and the Supreme Court issues a decision, I'll certainly be keeping the administration up to date and also update the board in future solicitor updates on where things stand. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Kyle. Interesting. We'll be happy to hear what happens with that, especially since it's gone so far. Next, I'd be looking for an approval for tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So that approved. Next, we'll have public comments on action items. Do we have any?
We had no public comments on action items.
Okay, great. Okay. So we'll move right along to approval of minutes. Can I have the motion to approve January 7th board meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Any questions? Comments? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we'll approve the minutes. Next, we're on to presentations and discussion. First, we'll have a motion to approve the following board policy revisions, adoptions, and repeals. First reading. Number 1 would be number 226, searches, repeal and replace. Peg, do you want to take this on? I'm sorry, I should have just turned it over to you, or Andrea.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. I'm going to basically turn it over to Dr. Farina, but before I do, I just want to make a friendly reminder to the school board that the policy committee is meticulously going through these 200 policies relative to pupils, and that these policies will require our careful attention. So please keep that in mind as we work through these, specifically the ones that are on the agenda tonight. Thank you. Dr. Farina?
Sure. Thank you. So I shared this with the board. This is the first read of policy 226, the new proposed policy 227, and the repeal of 233, suspension and expulsion. And I shared those, we shared them in policy committee, but I just, for your first read, I just want to remind the board that there are some significant changes in the policies, and just to mention them here tonight. 226 really talks about searches in school, on school grounds, or under any school supervised activity. I just also want to remind the board that we are under reasonable suspicion and not probable cause, because the school has a different responsibility for when searches are conducted. Any search, we have to be able to articulate what is being searched for. And so that's different. The other piece of this that is very different, that if you had the opportunity to sort of dig in, it's that this expands that policy to include searches that are not necessarily individualized. It expands it to random and general searches. So things like, you may know that this policy would cover something like a drug dog search. We have not had that, we have not done that, but this policy would include this. Please know that, law enforcement has a certain type of search and responsibility. We can assist if they present a warrant, but, generally, we have a responsibility to search under a different premise. The other thing that I would like to highlight, which is a question, it's the removal of clothing for searches, general searches. I think your principals will tell you, it's pockets, it's coats, it's sweatshirts, it's waistbands, socks, shoes, those kinds of cursory searches. Depending on the level of threat, there may be, a waistband search, if there is some sort of danger presented. Obviously, we would not examine underneath undergarments unless there was some sort of consultation with the school solicitor. That is not a practice of the district. So those are some of the discussion points that came up in policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this particular policy. And I know Kyle will have my back too. Any questions on that one? The next one, we are seeking to repeal what we call the drug and alcohol. This is a new policy renamed. So it's controlled substance and paraphernalia. So I just want to say it added some prescription over the counter, and that's something that was added to this policy, which is something current and an issue, or being under the influence. Much of this is fairly common, but it does include any school affiliated travel, any disruption to the school conducting its business, or anything that has a nexus and can come back into school fall in this policy. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. If it can be tracked back to school or some sort of transaction in school, that would be covered under this policy. And we would issue discipline related to that. So those, that one had a lot of substance that was similar to the last one, but it did add some, unfortunately abused substances that we see kids using these days. And any paraphernalia. I just also want to say a common question is, what about lookalike drugs? Yes. Yes, they fall under this policy. Same as lookalike weapons. So the last one, and this is one, 233 is our suspension expulsion. What we really need to highlight in this read is not necessarily significant policy changes, but what comes from this policy will be the AR and how the board will operate when they have an expulsion to address. Please know that expulsion is anything beyond 10 days. Kids have due process rights to a hearing. And then, there is, it's how the hearing is conducted. And I'm going to segue over to Kyle because we've had lengthy conversations about expulsion hearings. And I just want the board to hear this because we will need to make some decisions at the next policy committee. So Kyle, do you want to?
Sure. The policy references essentially two different types of hearings that occur. And the type of hearing that a student is entitled to depends upon the length of the exclusion from school. So if you have a student who is suspended for more than 3 days, but less than 11, so 10 or between 4 and 10 days, that student is entitled to an informal hearing. An informal hearing is essentially a meeting with a school administrator, at which time the student has the opportunity to explain themselves, explain, from their perspective what occurred, ask questions of anyone who's present, basically have an opportunity to hear the information against them and give an explanation or response to that. That particular process does not involve the school board. However, when a student is being recommended for expulsion, and when we hear expulsion, I think a lot of times there may be an understanding of, oh, forever being removed from school or never being able to attend school again. And that's not the definition that the public school code uses. What the school code uses is any exclusion from school entirely of more than 10 days in a row. So if you are a student and you are suspended or recommended for suspension for 11 days, that technically constitutes an expulsion, which entitles you to certain levels of due process. What that due process entails is the opportunity for a hearing before the school board. So if the administration, a student engages in some sort of misconduct that violates our code of student conduct, that student may be recommended by the administration pursuant to our code of conduct for removal from school for more than 10 days in a row. It could be, like I said, 11 days. It could be permanently, depending upon the severity of the conduct that the student engaged in. That student who is recommended by the administration for expulsion, more than 10 days in a row, has the opportunity to request a hearing. What this proposed policy states, and it's the same thing that's contained within the existing policy, is that hearing may take place before either the board, the full board, or a committee of the board. And that the policy allows for either, but one of the things that the policy committee really needs to hear feedback from the board on is whether there's a desire to have expulsion hearings that may occur be attended by all board members, or if the board is comfortable with having a committee be assigned. And the way that would work is, if it's a hearing of the full board, then we would have all board members be invited to attend a private hearing, and at which point the administration, typically led by the building principal, would present the evidence that supports the disciplinary recommendation, and then the student has an opportunity to present their side of the story, and then the board would act to decide whether the student in fact engaged in that conduct and what the consequences for that should be. So the other alternative is to have a committee, which could be, I would suggest, anywhere from 3 to 5, probably at most, board members who would attend the hearing, again, hear the evidence that's presented, hear from both parties, and make a recommendation in that instance to the full board. And a transcript would be kept of that hearing. And so the committee would in fact hear the case and then make a recommendation, which would then come before the full board for a vote. The benefit of a committee structure is that it tends to be a little more flexible scheduling. Expulsion hearings usually need to happen pretty quickly. And so using a committee structure, it allows typically for fewer board members' schedules to be examined and for that to occur more quickly. It also could be less of an intimidating setting if you're having a committee of the board instead of the full board. One thing to point out, though, or emphasize, is that regardless of whether the board utilizes all board members to sit on a hearing committee for an expulsion case, or just a committee of the board, is that all board members really need to maintain a position of neutrality before voting on that particular expulsion. And the reason for that is that the board, the role of the board is really one of acting as the judge, which is that you hear evidence from the administration and typically, again, the principal, building principal, assistant principals, who will give their explanation as to why they're recommending a particular discipline. But you're also, you have to hear from the student and give them a fair opportunity to explain themselves, explain why perhaps they believe they didn't violate a code of student conduct, and why they're, even if they did, what their consequence should be. So that can certainly be challenging if there are student disciplinary incidents that cause significant conversation in the community. There may be district residents who want to bring to your attention certain disciplinary incidents that may have occurred in the schools. And it certainly would be recommended that the response to any information that's brought to your attention is I can pass that along to the administration, but I really can't comment and give an opinion on what should occur to a student who may be engaged in certain behavior, because you may have to decide that case. That dispute may come before you if you are on a hearing, whether it be a committee that you sit on, or whether there's a committee that hears that dispute and makes a recommendation to the board, and the board just is voting whether to accept that recommendation or not. So I think that's probably the most significant issue that we've talked about with regard to this particular policy in the policy committee. If there are any other questions, I'm certainly happy to help answer them. But I think the main thing we need guidance on is whether all board members are interested in sitting on that hearing board, or if you're comfortable with having a committee hear those disputes.
Sorry, Judy, you're sitting next to me. I didn't even see you. Kyle, I just want some clarification. If we say that we're going to leave it as instead of a committee, it would be the board. If a case came before us, a board member can choose not to go, correct? I mean, it wouldn't mean that all 9 have to be there for the hearing to occur, or would all 9 have to be there?
Well, I mean, I think that's a question really is there a desire to try and get all board members to be present? If it's just like a meeting of the board, certainly there's an effort to find a time that all board members can be available. If there's if it were the case that a board member just said, I can't make it, I'm fine with, you moving forward without me. Certainly if it were 7 or 8 board members present, that would be fine. I think we would need at least a quorum of the board in that instance, which would be 5. Whereas if there's a decision to go with the committee route, we could potentially have, like I said, 3 members of the board sit on that. It's also the case that if there's let's say a board member is related to a student, or is a next door neighbor to a student, or for whatever reason feels like they can't sort of neutrally decide the case, a board member could recuse him or herself from a particular expulsion hearing, in which case we certainly wouldn't need to have, all board members be present.
The reason I asked was because I'm very hesitant to take that power away from future board members. I'm hoping I never have to, in the next 3 years, go to an expulsion hearing. But I don't want to limit it to make a policy that limits it to only 3 or 5 board members can go to that meeting. So I would prefer to keep it where it's the whole board. I just think that everyone who wants to be at that meeting should have the opportunity. That's just my opinion since you're asking for people's opinions.
Yeah, and I think one clarification is that the policy allows for either option. So we wouldn't be changing the policy. This is more direction for the administration in how do you want them to carry it out. So if there's an instance where the board says, you know what, actually, we all want to attend this, that can happen under the existing policy. It's really just, in a typical instance, how do you want the administration to plan to hold these sorts of hearings?
Anything else, Jude? Anyone else, Stephen?
So, Andrea, you might be able to help me out with this one. About 3 years ago, we had a couple of expulsion hearings, but they was the reason the board wasn't involved at that point due to the fact that those were settled before they got to an expulsion hearing, or because I don't recall a time when we had all 7 board members sitting in front of a student. I remember those were done after the fact.
Yes, in many of the instances, families sign the expulsion waiver in lieu of going forward with the the hearing. I believe, and Kyle, I don't know if you were here, I believe maybe we had one. I mean, one in the 7 years potentially that I was here, and it may have been early on.
And that would be why I don't remember them, because there was multiple chances for hearings, but the families had signed waivers.
Can I add to that? We were also not told what our role was. We weren't told that we could go to a hearing.
But we didn't have any hearings to go to.
No, we weren't told that we could have a hearing or be there.
Yeah, I think
That was when they hired a lawyer and didn't tell us that that was our lawyer. I'm not saying it was this administration, it was previous administration.
So, I mean, sorry, and I would just say they are, the part of the policy is that they are entitled to counsel. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but that is part of their due process right. And those two options have been in the policy the whole time. I do believe circumstantially that there's only been one, because families did sign waivers.
There actually was one last year, in my first year, which was fantastic. That I did work with you, Mrs. Hofkin, on that, because we did have this discussion with Kyle as involved in you as president, and the decision for that situation was a 3-person panel, and I put it out, I believe, Mr. Hipser, Mr. McCarrick were both there. It was all three. It was the 3 of you. And I think the decision to have the hearing was at the students' and parents' request to move forward through that. So when if the policy is not changing, it doesn't matter how it was. I know when that one came up, I did work with the board president at the time, and that was the decision in terms of a small committee versus the full board.
Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Kyle, is there any limit or expediency, a time limit that we have to work under to hold a hearing if we go for the full board? You know, we have that option for even doing the committee like we did last year, as Dr. Roche said. But if they want to do the full board, you know, as Kyle said, you know, it might take a while to get done. What is our time frame that we have to get that hearing done within?
Right. So there is a 15-day time window from basically the issuance of the notice of charges, which is the administration informing the student that there's a recommendation for expulsion. And that's the biggest challenge is that arranging for a hearing to occur, and oftentimes for a hearing to occur with enough time for that hearing to complete the hearing and have a decision made. You're right. That's the biggest challenge is getting it done within that time frame.
Anyone else? I don't see any. Carrie, yep, I see Carrie with your hand.
I sort of agree with Judy and not take it away, to leave the option. I'm just wondering, and now with COVID and, you know, the ubiquitousness of Zoom, is Zoom a possibility for these kind of hearings, or does it need to be in person? Because the Zoom part, I know several of our board members and myself included work half hour to an hour away, sometimes even more. So if you could hold it over Zoom and schedule it, I would prefer to leave it as an option to have the whole board if needed, just like as Judy mentioned. So I guess that's a question, is Zoom allowed in that? And then secondly, if my opinion would be to leave it open for the whole board if people are interested and want to participate.
Sure. I think under current circumstances, certainly Zoom would be a possibility. The state and federal court systems have been utilizing Zoom hearings, and certainly they are providing a level of due process that is maybe even more significant than what our students are entitled to. I would be very hesitant moving forward post-pandemic to utilize electronic hearings for students. I think, certainly out of fairness, and then even just ability to, in some instances, gauge credibility, have the students right before you, have the witnesses, administrators before you. There are certain advantages that come along with that. So it may be an option in the short term, but not something we probably want to do in the long term.
Okay, good points. Thank you.
Okay. And I also see Dana as well. Ryan?
Having the full board in the policy invited to attend doesn't mean that all of them are required to be there to hold the hearing. So I mean, it could be written up that way that it's not required that every board member attend, but that it should be required that they're all invited.
Dana?
Hopefully these hearings are going to be few and far between, but I think it definitely should be open to the entire board to be part of it and take part and give their opinions. So having gone through it, it was fascinating, and everybody should take part.
Okay, anyone else? I kind of agree with that. I think we should all have the choice to go.
Since everybody else threw in their own, I would agree with that. But I also like the ability that if it's a kid you've coached or or the ability to recuse yourself is there, because I think that's important as well, because many of us are involved in a lot of different things, and I just think that's important to have that too. So it's not mandatory.
Anyone else? Anything else?
I just said thank you for your feedback. Tuesday night, we'll be revisiting these policies and their ARs. And so we're, hopefully, in the ARs, we can formalize it and bring them back simultaneously. So we appreciate your feedback.
Yes, Judy.
I'm sorry. I said I did have one other question about this policy. I was just a little confused with the suspension part. It specifically says that when a suspension exceeds 3 days, the student, parent, and parent guardian shall be given the opportunity for an informal hearing with the school. It should take place as soon as possible after the suspension, and the district shall offer to hold it within the first 5 days of the suspension. It then goes on to say that the purpose of that hearing is to show why, give the student a chance to show why the student should not be suspended. Well, if that's part of the purpose of the informal hearing, if we're not offering it until 5 days later, isn't that kind of closing the barn door after the horses escaped? I don't understand. Like, if we're going to give them a chance to explain why they shouldn't be suspended, shouldn't we give them that chance before they've actually missed 5 days of school? Am I not understanding this correctly?
I think your concern is well taken. And so that particular timeline is a statutory state timeline, not an Upper Perkiomen timeline. So it certainly doesn't make a whole lot of sense if, for example, you have a student who's suspended for 4 days, and on the 5th day after they have been suspended, we hold a hearing about whether they should be suspended or not. At that point, the most that we could do is remove it from their record, presumably. So I think certainly there should be an effort on the part of the administration to hold those hearings as early as possible within that suspension window. And so that there's an opportunity in the event that a student demonstrates, whether it be remorse or evidence that they didn't do the act that they're alleged to have committed. So there's an opportunity to stop the suspension without them having to serve the full number of days that they've been suspended. So I think to your point, we should certainly strive to have that as early in the window as possible, but the law does allow for a 5-day period within which that can happen.
And if I can just say, by practice, you generally, our administrators try to hold it day 3 for that very reason. But as schedules allow on the family side, truthfully.
Okay, do we have anything else with the presentation? Peg, are you good? Okay. All right, well, we'll move on to letter B, which is our energy performance contract update presentation. And first, I'll turn it over to our facilities director, Doug Kenwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. I'm excited tonight to announce that we've reached a significant milestone in this project. As everyone's aware, we've been working over the last number of months to develop and vet and complete an audit or a deep dive through the ECMs that we identified in phase 1A. That was included in the board update last Friday. And you'll see on the agenda later this evening, there are two motions, one of which is approving an energy services agreement with Noresco, and the other is a construction work order, both of which will allow us, with your approval, to proceed to construction on the phase 1A ECMs in March. We thought it was an appropriate time to provide the board an update. And we have Michael Lang here with us from Provident Energy Consulting, and he has a very brief presentation that he would like to walk everyone through. So I yield the floor to Michael.
Thanks, Doug. Good evening, everyone. I'm not familiar with this. Does the presentation come on my screen, or can you see it? Or I could try to go off memory. Or do I share it? Is that what I do?
We're working on it. Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
That's my bad. So you're good.
Happy birthday to those folks that have birthdays.
Thanks.
Could you sing to them? They were hoping that none of us here would do.
I don't know if you want to hear that. I don't. My voice is not great. I'll bring my daughter down. She's much better. Okay, this is good. Just again, as Doug mentioned, we're here to provide an update on where we are right now with the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act project. Next slide. The agenda tonight, real quick, again, we want to reiterate the program goals. Think it's important to keep those in mind. Talk about the details and the financials of phase 1A, and then some next steps. Next slide. Program goals. If you remember, we are developing what we think is a good facility improvement plan. This is a step in the process. A few months ago when we presented, we had over 50 ECMs, energy conservation measures, that the board authorized us to explore. And with that, 24 of those hopefully will be implemented by Noresco. That is the deep dive Doug is speaking of. That is happening in phase 1A and 1B. As you'll see later, we'll detail the few ECMs that we have on 1A. They are few, but they are very important ECMs. Reduce energy consumption obviously is a goal, but improving the learning environment, I think, is a very strong piece of this. Lighting environments will be improved greatly, airflow throughout the facilities, weatherization, stopping infiltration coming in, and things of that nature will really help improve the learning environment. And specifically at the high school, we heard loud and clear about supporting the long-term use and making sure anything that's done here in this program would support that. Next slide. So with that, this phase 1A IGA investment grade audit report's completed. I'm assuming you have that. I saw it was in the board package. I do want to, just take a bit of time to thank Doug and Sandy tremendously. Those folks have worked very, very hard on this, and with Noresco, with ICS, with Provident, but without Doug and Sandy, I mean, this thing is not where it's at today. And again, we were approved in December, and we've been hustling every day, really through the holidays, over the holidays. So really, really thankful to those folks, Doug and Sandy on the admin team for the help. That report was completed last week. What it did was it included LED lighting. This is district-wide, both interior and exterior. This will be a standardization. So each classroom will look, the same as you walk in classroom to classroom, gyms, auditoriums, cafeterias. That'll get that real standard feel for the lighting and the lighting levels. Building envelope improvements. That's that weatherization, door stripping, ceiling cracks, any kind of outside air that shouldn't be entering the building, will be addressed. There's a slight roof repair at Marlboro that's been a nuisance, and then the big ticket item obviously is the chiller at the high school. That has been a problem for quite some time, and in fact is not working anymore. So that'll be replaced here in 1A as well as some AHU, which are air handling unit repairs. Those are the boxes that move air, move water throughout the building. There's a lot of things in those boxes that just aren't working. And again, that'll help improve airflow, both cold and hot, and just comfort levels throughout the building. Next slide. So where are we so far? This phase 1A is just over 2.7 million. Again, that'll create an annual savings of just over $57,000 and a 20-year with escalation rates, modest 2% per year for energy, and I think 3% for O&M, about 1.4 million over 20 years. So it's a good chunk of savings that'll help offset the cost here. Next slide. Next steps, I guess, as Doug alluded to, I saw on your agenda, there's a couple motions to hopefully approve the energy services agreement. That's just the kind of base agreement from Noresco. And then what flows from there is the construction work order, which outlines everything. That's the $2.7 million job of phase 1A. And of course, we have been going through phase 1B currently in parallel with 1A. So we will continue this work on phase 1B and hopefully within the next few months be back to you with an update on 1B and hopefully some action items there as well to address the rest of this project. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to any questions if you have any, or I'll hang around and wait until the motion or whatever you folks like. I'll be here.
I have to say, thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it. I know the facilities committee does. I know there's a lot of work been done on this project.
Absolutely.
And I, for one, am really anxious to see it get started, physically get started, other than the ordering of the chiller, which we already approved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyone have any questions, comments?
I had a quick comment. I just can't say how happy I am to see that we're getting all this done. I mean, just that chiller alone needed to be replaced, 8 or 9 years ago. And I think if I remember right, we spent almost $1 million in mold remediation after that failure. So this is an investment now that I think is going to pay off, over the years. So I'm really happy to see this personally.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else?
I'm just going to make a quick comment. I want to thank the people who are willing to sit on the facilities committee, because I read that report and could barely stay awake. I don't know how you guys make it through a meeting. If I read one more thing about light bulbs and weather stripping. So thank you guys so much who are willing to sit on that committee, because I don't think I want to be on that one.
It sure is an education, I can tell you that. I know I've learned a lot.
These meetings are fun. I like them.
They are fun. I think so.
Yeah, I apologize. I really should have thanked them too, because they were absolutely way involved in this, ESCO interviews and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, thank you folks too, that you've done well.
Thanks. Anyone else? So I would just say that the facilities committee, when we get to these motions, would be in full support. Okay, Mike, you can hang in if you want.
Okay. Yep,
You're on if you'd like, or not. Thank you.
Yeah, I can move to the back, and if I need to come back up, just whatever you have to do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
We have one piece of business that we kind of forgot. I kind of forgot. We needed a motion to approve the following board policy revisions, adoptions, and repeals for first read.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Well, we'll move on to old business. I don't think we have any. Okay, well, we'll move away from old business then. We'll move on to new business. I'd like to, first would be the personnel report.
Melanie, if I could, I'd like to make a motion to approve the personnel report in its entirety.
Second.
Okay, so that just moves us to A. Okay. Any questions? Anyone? I don't see any. Nope, don't see any on screen. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move on to action items.
Melanie, if you wouldn't mind, could I make a motion to approve action items 1 and 2? 1, it would be a motion to approve the program of studies for 21 and 22. And number 2 would be a motion to approve the MCIU budget for July 1, 2021, decreasing $545 from last year.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion.
Melanie, if you wouldn't mind, could I make a motion to approve action items 3, 4, and 5 as one? Number 3 is the following board policy: 218 terroristic threats, 223 AR use of bicycles and motor vehicles, 224 AR the care of school property, special education services, an agreement with Wood Services for a specific student, and an agreement for payment for transportation for a specific student, and a motion to approve Doug Kenwood as the AHERA designated person.
Second.
Melanie, can I just interrupt 1 second?
Sure.
And this is my fault, so I apologize. Terroristic threats should say repeal and replace.
I'll still accept it.
One
Second.
included in the packet was the accurate one, but it should say repeal and replace.
There's a typo on the agenda. Okay. All right. Any discussion?
I have a question. How often do you have to designate your HERA person?
Once?
Just once.
So who has it been before you?
Me. This was just to formalize it, but it's always been me.
And you should see those reports, Judy. That's really scary. That's coffee.
I
work.
used to write those reports.
We'll see. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. For motion for item 6, motion to approve construction work order number 1 from Noresco for the implementation.
I'm sorry, Madam President. you're
I
up.
know, I'm muted, I'm sorry, I just realized. I was holding my space bar down, but I let go. Motion to approve construction work order number 1 with Noresco for the implementation of the identified scope of work in the amount of $2,740,540. Scope of work for construction work order 1 includes LED lighting, weatherization improvements, and the replacement of the chiller at the high school.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Thank you, Doug.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you
Doug.
all.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion approved. Thank you very much.
If Melanie, if you wouldn't mind, could I make a motion to approve action items that's 7, 8, and 9? 7 would be the energy services agreement with Noresco. Number 8 would be the acknowledgement and attachment of our audit report. And the 9th one would be a motion to approve the tax collection resolution.
I'll second that.
Discussion, questions?
I did have a quick question on the Gorman Associates audit report. Is there any significant findings that we should be aware of?
No, there is
Everything
not.
was in order?
I read it the other weekend. That was more coffee.
Okay, everything's fine then. That's great.
Yes, yes. We're in good shape. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to.
I make a motion for action item 10.
Okay.
A motion to approve Christ Transportation.
Okay, so we have a first and a second on motion to approve the school bus transportation contract with Christ Transportation beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2028. Any discussion?
I would just like to say that I know a lot of work went into this decision and there was a lot of meetings. I know I sat in on one of them. And, obviously some of these decisions are tough, but I appreciate the committee's work and the recommendation.
And yes, we do have a recommendation from the Finance Committee to go with Christ Transportation. Any other questions?
I just had a comment. I wanted to thank all the bus drivers from our current vendor that we've worked with for a long time. A lot of them were, my son is in the special education program, so we had very close relationships with some of the bus drivers. So I did want to thank them personally and know this is more of a business decision rather than the personnel decision.
Well, hopefully we'll see a lot of those drivers
Yes.
going
the hope.
over to Christ. Yes. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, thank you very much. Next, I would like the motion to approve Norman's Bus Service Incorporated contract for 20.
You're on mute.
Oh, yeah, you
Sorry. May I make a motion to approve item 11 for Norman's Bus Service and 12 for the vehicle drivers provided by Coventry?
So moved. Second, sorry.
are. Any discussion? Questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we're approved. Oh, and that's all of our action items. All right, well, I will turn it over to Mr. Cunningham for the financial reports.
Hey, thank you, Melanie. Let's move over to our financial reports. It's attachment H. We're going to move to page 43. It'll take you a second to scroll to that. So pages 43 to 49 are our general fund payments. I would like to make a motion to approve our general fund payments in the total amount of $1,487,086.38. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I heard Judy first, sorry. Okay, any discussions? It's a lot. It's a couple pages, so take your time if anyone has any questions.
Why is it so much? Is it any abnormal amount of pages?
Normally they're about 3 to 4 pages, so it might just be Sandy's exciting time of the year.
I have a question. Check number 11624 for Verco Incorporated for $15,732.
Page 45.
Oh, yeah, sorry, page 45.
Yes, that's for 100 desks that we're using in the cafeterias.
I always like to pick out the ones that I'm not sure of. So you see, there's a lot of cyber school payments on here.
Yes.
Makes me very sad.
Yes.
Sandy, do you know offhand what our total cyber school payments were? Just a guess.
Right now, we're over $1 million, but I can get you the exact
What
numbers.
would be a normal number?
Normally for the year, it's only about 1.2, 1.3. This year will be much higher.
Oh, wow.
Can we get those numbers?
I can get you those numbers. I'll bring
Thank you very much.
I'll send you something up to where we are up to date. How's that?
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now, if we move on to pages 50 and 51, those are capital projects and capital reserve payments. I would like to make a motion to approve those amounts in total of $29,464. I'm sorry, $64.90. Do I have a second?
I'll make that motion.
That'll be a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Melanie.
Okay, we'll move along to new follow-up items. Other than the amount for the charter schools, I don't know that we have any new follow-up items. Am I correct? Anyone? Okay, and then we'll follow along to public comments.
We did have several submitted public comments. So I'll call their name, and if you're there, can you please raise your hand? Catherine Guaro, if I said that correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't.
Keith, could you mute your mic?
Catherine? Catherine, could you raise your hand if you're out there? Okay. So our second submitted comment is Katie Hellman.
You're in now.
You're not
Are
muted.
you muted?
No. Katie Hellman. Okay, I'll keep going. JP Prego. Hi, JP, can you hear us?
I got you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you, JP, for your township of residents. And we just remind all of the speakers that there is a 2-minute timeline.
All right, thank you. Upper Hanover Township. I just wanted to comment on the experience, the hybrid experience at the elementary level, specifically Marlboro. I had my doubts. I have kids in 3rd grade. I had my doubts about them having to split up and have 2 teachers, 2 different teachers in the same week trying to teach the same thing in a continuous manner. And I would have to say that so far it's been seamless. My kids are loving it. Everything's been going great. The teachers are doing a fantastic job, especially communicating with the parents, communicating with the kids, and, communicating with each other to make that learning experience for at least my kids, it be terrific. And I just wanted to commend them on that. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice comment. It's good to hear that.
Maggie Buckwalter. Hi, Maggie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Maggie Buckwalter, Upper Hanover Township. And I'm just following up on the information that we talked about last time regarding discriminatory, sexually harassing comments made by one of the board members. And I'm just reading from information from the federal government that says, when the district becomes aware of the existence of an alleged Title IX harassment or discrimination, is obligated by law to take prompt and appropriate action, whether or not the victim or victimized classes in the district want to proceed or not. So I'm following up to see what the school board members intend to do regarding calling the Office of Civil Rights or filing a Title IX complaint.
Kyle, would you like to take a stab at that?
Do you have any additional comments? If you want to conclude your comment, and then I can respond.
I will conclude.
She said she's going to conclude.
Okay. So as far as Title IX, that statement in terms of individuals being permitted to file a complaint, even if they are not the victim on behalf of another victim, that's certainly accurate. To my knowledge, any complaint that the district receives pursuant to Title IX, the district would handle in accordance with its policies and procedures. Those policies are publicly available on the school district's website. There is also a form for anyone who believes that they have been subject to discriminatory behavior, or that they are aware of individuals within the district being the victims of discriminatory behavior. And certainly the district would take that seriously. One of the determinations as part of any Title IX investigation as to whether a student or a staff member or a community member has been excluded from participation in an activity of the district, denied the benefits of a program of the district. And in any instance, if there were such conduct or consequences occurring, the district would take appropriate action to handle that.
Thanks, Kyle.
Next, we have Jennifer Beltz. Jennifer, are you there? Hi, Jennifer, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Jennifer, you're ready.
Okay, I'm glad that hybrid is working for some students, but particularly I have an elementary son who goes to Marlboro, and he has ADHD. And he tried to go and he couldn't wear the mask. He threw up in his mask. The school nurse didn't call me and just allowed him to stay at school. He later developed a headache with the mask. I don't feel that he has gotten the help that he needs academically. He is the one that is suffering with this. And ultimately, I would like for our students to go back to school full-time. And if they're not going to school full-time, I would like to see, he has a 504. He's supposed to get help with his testing. That hasn't happened at all. And when I reach out to the principal at Marlboro, I've had 2 incidences with her. The recent one I had, they didn't want to let me pick up his Valentine's stuff by placing it outside. And when I called her, she answered the phone with, yes. That's how she answered the phone. So, that's my comment here.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's the conclusion of the submitted comments. We do have 8 individuals in attendance who have their hands raised, so I'll just go through them. We have Aaron Engel. Hi, Aaron, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, this is actually Jake Engel, Upper Hanover Township.
Hi, Jake.
Okay.
It's quite disturbing to sit through this whole meeting and not hear any discussion about putting together a plan to have our students back in school full time. Quakertown, Penn Ridge, Boyertown, Souderton, Springford, Saucon Valley, North Penn. These are all surrounding districts that have figured out how to have their students in person full time, and they all have far more students in their district than Upper Perk. It took this district 5 months to implement a hybrid model with far less students to account for, and everybody seems to want to pat themselves on the back for that accomplishment. It's time for this board to start taking accountability and making decisions in the best interests of our students, and not deferring to teachers and administration on everything. You owe it to the families of this district to initiate a plan to get our students back in the classroom on a full-time basis immediately. The lack of formulating any type of plan to accomplish this and just pushing everything off until next school year is unacceptable. This is a district that ranks 19th out of 21 schools in Montgomery County, leading only Norristown and Pottstown. With continued lack of full-day in-person instruction, when surrounding districts are back, this district's ranking certainly isn't improving, and that, quite frankly, is embarrassing. The decisions of this board have been inconsistent from the beginning of this pandemic. Numerous board members have stated that you believe in, quote, following the science and requiring that magical 6 foot of distance between students in the classroom is being absolutely necessary, but have also made the decision to allow all sports to continue, which clearly isn't, quote, following the science. The reasoning some members of this board gave for allowing sports is that parents have a choice. If that was your stance then, I ask you this: how is this educational model any different from that? Parents that don't feel comfortable sending their children to school within 6 feet can keep them virtual. You have been elected into your position to make difficult decisions with our students' best interests in mind. Right now, many families are struggling with students that are not excelling and have fallen way behind the progress of children in neighboring districts. Your continued lack of inaction and the unwillingness to make difficult decisions has caused the students of this district great harm. I ask that you do your job and start making arrangements immediately to get the students in person full time this year.
Thank you, Jake. Next, we have Jennifer Moran. Hi, Jennifer, can you hear us?
Hi, everybody.
You're good to go, Jennifer.
All right, so Jennifer Moran, Upper Hanover / Pennsburg. I hope everyone is doing well tonight. So I am going to continue what I was trying to talk about at the last meeting, and that is shining a light on the kids and families that are still virtual. I love what I'm hearing so far about hybrid. I mean, it sounds obviously all the schools are still open. And that's awesome. You know, all my kids are virtual right now. Okay. But knowing how great hybrid is going from what I'm hearing gives me hope that my kids are going to be able to go back to school, like hopefully really sometime soon. Okay. So I love all of that. And I don't want to take attention away from that. But I do not want the virtual families left behind. A light needs to be shined there too. Again, I'm not trying to take away from hybrid. I'm not trying to take away from the teachers. I'm bringing this to you, the board, because it is a school district issue. Each one of the schools is kind of leaving behind the virtual kids. Wednesdays, there was a day that kids were able to make up tests, go to their teachers. Teachers would sometimes be able to have meetings with the parents. Well, now you even took that away from the virtual kids. Hybrid kids get to talk to their teachers in person, and that's great, and I'm so happy for them. What about my kid? My kid needs that opportunity too. Giving 20 minutes in the morning or 20 minutes in the afternoon, I'm sorry, that's not really fair because they still have to share that time with kids that are in person. I appreciate everything everyone is doing, but please, we need some attention over on this side. And I am not the only parent that feels this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have Mary Cannon. Hi, Mary, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mary, you're good.
Okay, great. This is Mary Cannon. I'm from Hereford. I have a prepared statement I'd like to hopefully finish reading. I would like to start by thanking everyone for their continued work during this crazy time. The reason for my speaking tonight is to express my disappointment of how things were handled last meeting in regards to Mrs. Hofkin. I was not given the opportunity to speak about this at the last meeting. At the start of public comments, it was stated that the board was taking comments first and only hybrid, and then after the board would take comments in regards to Mrs. Hofkin. It was not stated that we must choose one or the other. It was not fair to those of us that had a comment about both not being allowed to speak when it was time to comment. Had I known, I would not been given the opportunity. I would have waited to have spoken. I realize we're only allowed to speak 2 minutes, but you chose to mute us mid-sentence, knowing a lot of the community was outraged, was mind-boggling. I've been attending meetings, and the board has allowed people to finish their thoughts or sentences at the very least, and also has allowed people to speak multiple times. Meetings have gone on for hours just on public comments alone. It was disappointing to feel like you did not want to hear from the community. The community did not put the board in this position, Mrs. Hofkin did. You were put on the board by us to be our voices and listen to us, to help better our children's education and school experience, not solely for your own agendas. To Mrs. Hofkin, as a parent of 6 children that attend Upper Perk, one who has graduated already and is a part of the LGBTQ plus community, your insensitive posts on social media over the past year is beyond disappointing and sad to know there is someone on the board that is supposed to be helping to ensure the protection of our children in schools, essentially promoting bullying. Yes, I know you do not see it that way, and you throw out that it's your First Amendment right to say what you want. And yes, you are correct, it is. I serve my country protecting that right. However, the First Amendment does not protect you from consequences to your words. You should be held to the highest standards as a school board member, showing our children how to behave and hold themselves in a compassionate, empathetic way, showing them it's not okay to insult someone or belittle them. Our children must adhere to such a policy, and you should as board members. My children would never be allowed to say such things even on social media, and there is a policy which does include cyberbullying. At this time, they cannot use the First Amendment.
Your 2 minutes is up.
2 sentences left, if I can. Is it okay if I finish?
Mary, I'd really like to have the rest of the people that already have their hands up. We've been stating that there's a 2-minute time limit, and I just have to say, I'm pretty sure you talked more than one time at our last meeting. And
I spoke in regards to hybrid, and then when it came around to speak about
public
that.
comment is public comment. I just wanted to get the school district business in first. Thank you.
We have Sean. Hi, Sean, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Sean. Just remind us of your township of residence, please.
Sure. My name is Sean. I live in Green Lane. My friend sent me the video of the last meeting, and I was too blown away by it to not speak tonight. I couldn't believe that there were so many people outraged over a meme. I've got a few points to make. One, you do not get to decide what the community stands for. The taxpayers and voters that happen to live in the Upper Perk School District are not a homogenous group. There are plenty of us who agree with and support Ms. Hopkin, and we could not care less if you think that means we support hate. Two, you can misuse the word hate 1,000 times, but that doesn't mean you get to redefine it. Dictionary.com says, hate is defined as to dislike intensely or passionately, to feel extreme aversion for or extreme hostility toward. That definition perfectly describes how Mrs. Hopkin has been treated. Hate is not someone sharing a meme you find distasteful. Hate is attempting to ruin a woman's life over nothing and saying it's the right thing to do. Three, this new platitude, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequence. It's just the newspeak way of saying, if you say something we disapprove of, we will attempt to ruin your life out of spite and frame it as justice. These attacks have nothing to do with accountability and everything to do with silencing somebody you disagree with. The mob attacking Mrs. Hopkin won't stop with her. They will go after anybody they deem guilty of wrongthink. This will undoubtedly include students who have no recourse other than to bow to the mob. To all the school board members who have called on Mrs. Hopkin to resign, I'm calling on you to resign. To the teachers and educators calling for Mrs. Hopkin to resign, I'm calling on you to resign. Calling for someone's resignation for sharing a meme that you don't like is unacceptable and you should be held accountable. I'm also calling on parents to pull their kids out of the school system. We cannot let these ideologues brainwash our children. Lastly, I'd like to apologize to Rayanne. I'm truly sorry. I had no idea things were this bad. I should have started paying attention sooner. End comment.
Sean, please state your full name for the record.
He's Green Lane.
Green Lane.
Can we please make a note going forward that first and last names have to be given?
Yes. We have Levi Parson. Levi, can you hear us? Levi?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome, thank you.
First, and can you also give us your township,
yeah.
Levi?
Yes,
Thank you.
Levi Parson, and I live in Red Hill.
Thank you so much.
My name is Levi Parson, and I'm here again this week, as I was last week, to express my concern the attacking of our free speech. I was taken back last meeting at the number of comments attacking Ms. Hopkin. J.R. Wren said to me, shame on you, Levi, for making this First Amendment issue, and mentioned that she had to be held accountable for the things that she says. You are wrong. This is absolutely a First Amendment issue. Holding someone accountable does not mean launching a social justice inquisition over nothing. President Trump was banned from Twitter, and multiple people are being canceled for their beliefs across the board as we speak. Rand Hopkin is also being censored and harassed to leave the board. What about those of us that agree with them? Does our inclusivity not apply to us? Either way, there are thousands of us in this school district, and we are not going anywhere. To the outraged mob that is trying to erase Rand, you preach that hate has no home here. And in the same breath, you lob malicious and hateful attacks at this woman who is guilty of exactly nothing. Taking offense on someone else's behalf is not virtue, it's weakness. We should instead be setting examples of strength and resilience to our children. All the board members who have called for Ms. Hopkins, you should immediately resign. And for the teachers that have called for Ms. Hopkins' resignation should also resign. You should be worried about teaching our children, but you're using your platform to push your hateful ideas and agendas. It is the parents' responsibility to teach values, not yours. This is appalling, and the fact that you think you have the right to do this is disgusting. Our community deserves an apology for the blowing up of this matter. How about you get back to putting our children into schools instead of worrying about what other people think? Thank you.
Thank you, Levi. Next, we have Christine Schmoyer. Hi, Christine, can you hear us?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Christine.
Okay, great. So Christine Schmoyer, Pennsburg Borough. First of all, I would really like to thank everyone for all of the hard work that's been put in for hybrid. I understand a lot of hard work goes into it, and the kids are glad to be back in school, even for only 2 days, but they're happy to be there. So I appreciate that. I would like to comment to those who support the opportunity for a board member to post discriminatory comments on social media and feel that that should be acceptable. There's a lot of issues with that, but the part that bothers us significantly that do not approve of that is that our students are held to a higher standard than a school board member is. And that's the problem. A student can be kicked out of school for saying the exact same things that a board member can say. That's my comment there. So the real intention of my comment is that after the last meeting, I sent a question to the board. I appreciate the responses, but the ones that I got, they were addressing the perceived intention of the question as opposed to the actual question. So I would like to ask my question here, and I hope that I get a response. But so my question was, how does a community member formally submit something, whether it is a policy submission, question, or statement for formal consideration by the board or committee, and provide a formal response? I realize that these 2 minutes are available, but often a response is not provided as one is not required. As it is apparent from comments, people would like a response to their issues, questions, options. So again, I submit my question for consideration. How does a community member formally submit something for formal consideration and receive a formal response? Thank you for your time. I hope I receive an answer to this question.
Thank you so much, Christine.
So one of the, if I could just jump in, one of the venues for people to reach out to us, of course, is the board communication line, which is on the UPSD website. What's nice about that website is if you're a little afraid of perchance repercussions happening to you, you can submit a comment anonymously. Of course, we want to make sure that if it's anything of a serious nature, you've got to put your name to it, right? But that is a venue to contact the board. There is, of course, the if you email the board, UPSD board at upsd.org, everything comes to us as well too. So you could, start through that manner.
And you will get a formal response in that method.
Yeah, and you get a response for that. Not to put more work on the board vice president, but there you go, Judy.
There's also, if you
Sorry, Judy.
had questions that would be covered in specific committees, all public is welcome to our committees as well.
Absolutely.
Next, we have Allison Patilla. Hi, Allison, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi, Andrea, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I also want to echo some of the comments around what we're doing for full-time and see if we can get an answer on the next school board meeting. I haven't heard much in the regards to our plans for moving to full-time or if we're planning on staying hybrid through the end of the year. Particularly challenging, the Wednesdays have changed for us. When we were in full virtual, was working, well, better than obviously 2020, and 2021 was looking like really good for virtual, but Wednesdays are now completely autonomous and finding it very difficult to manage that in any respect, to be honest. But our main goal is honestly to get the kids back in full time. I haven't heard a plan for that. I'd love to hear more about that at the next school board meeting. I do also want to make a quick comment that from what I understand, these public comments are not commented back on in this forum, except for Maggie Buckwater. So, I would just like to know, to stay uniform in who's responding and when we're responding. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Next, we have Troy Long. Hi, Troy, can you hear us?
I can, Andrea. Thank you.
All right, just remind us of your township and you are good. to
Troy
speak.
Long. I live in Marlboro Township.
Great, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to revisit something that you guys mentioned tonight in regards to the COVID antigen testing with the Buy Next Now cards. I work in healthcare. We've been using them for probably the last 6 to 7 months, and I commend the board and the school district for implementing that. It's a phenomenal way to quickly get a 15-minute determination on COVID, and we can make decisions in regards to that. I just want to draw the attention to the board in regards to something the CDC does indicate. So if you have somebody that's symptomatic who takes a POC antigen test, like that Buy Next Now card, and they are negative, it is suggested to follow that up with a PCR test for a more specific ruling out, because there are false negatives that do come with those tests. So I just wanted to see if the board was going to adopt something a little more stringent on that, because there is the probability that you could have someone who has COVID, who has a negative test, they are symptomatic, and you could put them back into a school and they could possibly spread that. That's my comment.
Dr. Farina, would you like to address that? Because I know you have the answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Troy. And yeah, as we talked before with the board, the Buy Next Now is just a presumptive test. We have been guided by Children's Hospital that if anything is an unpredicted response. So as Troy described, if somebody is very symptomatic and they come up negative, that's unexpected. And so in those cases where there are observable and significant signs that are associated with COVID-19, we may ask families to go get a confirmatory test at Green Lane or one of the county testing sites for a PCR. For our staff, we administer. So we administer the Q test here at the Ed Center. It's a drive up. So if we have those unexpected responses in staff members who are participating in the antigen test or who come up positive, we administer the confirmatory test on site here at the Education Center. But Troy does bring up a good point that, I really haven't mentioned that there are some circumstances where we may work with the family to say, this is a real unexpected response of this Buy Next Now, and we would ask you to get confirmatory testing. Also, if you come up negative, but you're symptomatic for a long period of time, we would ask you, and your child can't come to school because they're sick, and they shouldn't be in school regardless if they're sick, to proceed to get a confirmatory test before they return. So thank you, Troy. I had not mentioned that, but that is definitely accurate. And we have not talked about confirmatory testing for the whole student population yet.
Thanks, Dr. Farina.
So next we have Hope Mannion. Hi, Hope, can you hear us?
I can you hear me?
I can hear you, Hope. You're ready to go.
Hi, Hope Mannion, Hereford Township. I want to start by thanking the board members who have stood in opposition, full-throated condemnation of hatred and bigotry on the part of Mrs. Hofkan and others in our community. So just wanted to say, despite some other commentary tonight, the majority of the community is with you, and we appreciate your decency. One of the benefits of going last in the comments is that I have an opportunity to react to other comments. And so another comment I have for the board is, please keep in mind that your job is not to open schools. Your job is to deliver effective education to the children in this community. And you need to do that in a way that is safe and mindful of science and data, not some insistence that it's school's job to make sure that children are watched all day and children have opportunities for sports and whatnot. Your first priority is delivering effective education in a way that is safe for students, teachers, and all of their staff in the school, as well as the rest of the community. Additionally, if you found yourself swayed by comments tonight to the extent that there's something wrong with shouting down bigotry, like it's a violation of free speech, I just want to maybe encourage you to Google a concept called the paradox of tolerance, which is a philosophical concept that talks about how to have a tolerant society, unfortunately, we have to be intolerant of intolerance. Do not let these people twist the definition of hate. stand by your principles. We really appreciate it. Thanks a lot for your service.
Thank you, Hope. We have one final comment. Caleb J. Caleb, we're going to ask you to give your full name and township of residence. Caleb, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi, yes. Can you give us your full name and township of residence, please?
Yeah, Caleb Robertson's son. Sorry, Pennsburg.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I am in support of Ms. Hofkin. She should not be attacked like this. It's blatantly aggressive bullying. It's unacceptable. Also, about the health and safety measures, why is there no emphasis on vitamin intake and healthy diets in order to fight against COVID? Children shouldn't be forced to take such crazy measures like this. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caleb. That was the last public comment.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. We'll be on with board comments then. Any board comments? Mike, I see your hand up.
All right, thank you. And thank you to everybody that spoke tonight. I want to ask this question to start because we heard this a lot last meeting and we heard it some tonight as well. And that's about the virtual kids getting some love. And just because we've heard a couple of people talk about it, and maybe it's something we could talk a little bit more about, you know, at the next board meeting, at the workshop or whatever. But I'm kind of interested to learn, since we have made that switch, because I have kids in the district, right? And, you know, what are we doing to support those virtual kids with Wednesday learning and opportunities to be able to meet with teachers and staff? Like, I know there are some moments in there, but how are we offering it to them? And I don't know if you can speak to it tonight, you can speak to the next board meeting, but can you maybe fill me in a little bit here? Is there?
So I can give you a little sliver of sort of information, but I do think, you know, if you want us to sort of present that, you know, in a deeper way, we could do it at workshop or the next board meeting. So remember that the afternoons, when we made this transition, we have the hybrid required triads and we have UPOLA. And so part of that afternoon is spent for teacher planning for continuity across programs. And so we knew that could create a hiccup. You know, I would talk to Mrs. Bast a little further about maybe how to get some more feedback from those families, because you're right, we have heard some of that. So, you know, I think on our part, if we can sort of maybe ask those families what that might look like or how further to support them, that would be a worthwhile venture at this point, because it has been a concern. You know, and our virtual Wednesdays in the morning, you know, our hybrid kids, or they all have that morning meeting and that morning time, but it is not the bulk of their day. It truly is not. So, you know, I would suggest that perhaps if Mrs. Bast and Mrs. Rothermel and the building principals and I could come back and sort of give you a little more information and maybe reach out to some families and find out, you know, what would help them make this a little more successful.
I love that idea. I love that idea because I think, you know, we're kind of hearing it here, and obviously, you know, we all know people in the community and stuff like that, and they come up and say something. So I was glad it was brought up tonight, because that's one of those things that you kind of want to, you know, dive more into, because if you're hearing that, like, okay, what are like the idea of some surveys or something like that to get some additional feedback, figure out, you know, what kind of tweaks, because obviously it's a learning process for all of us. We talked tonight about, you know, the symptom checker and how we've made tweaks to that to make that a better system. So that's part of it is, okay, how can we tweak it? How can we make it better? So growing with the process, I think, is really important. So I would love to hear.
And I do think there are families who, even if we start talking about kids in school, more days, more time, more consistency, there are families who are going to be accessing virtual programming. And so we, you know, it's not for nothing, because there are families who are going to do that.
through the end of the year. And I think you heard Dr. Roach talk about this. At one point, we may be talking about a virtual option moving forward. So we want to make sure we have that information from our families on how to make it successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the more we fine tune it and make it productive, we keep kids in district as opposed to having them go elsewhere. As far we forgot to mention this when we talked about the personnel report, but we always ask Georgie. I know you're here. Did we offer exit interviews to anybody that might have left us?
Yes.
She's nodding yes.
As usual, everyone's given the opportunity to complete an exit interview.
How do we? I always wanted to ask. How do we market that? Like, for lack of a better term, is it say, hey, by the way, you're going, make sure you fill out this survey? Like, are we kind of pushing it a little bit, do you think?
Yep.
Or
So every person who resigns, when Elise completes their final paperwork, copied on the email, she attaches the form and gives them the option to either come in and meet with us or send it in by mail or complete it and scan it to us by email. We get some of each. This week we got one by snail mail.
okay. Cool. At some point we see what it is that you send out, just out of curiosity's sake.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mike, I would just point out we've done that for several years, and we did have with Georgie's predecessor, she gave a review annually. I did have that follow-up question to say, when do we get that review? I think we were getting it maybe every year would be a high-level summary of anything that's actionable for us that could help to improve retention.
Sure, I'd be glad to prepare something.
Nice.
Thanks, Georgie.
Way to go, Carrie. I like that. And then I just have I have one other thing to say. Listen, it's I was raised a lot by my grandparents. Took me to church, right? And we learned about this thing called the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated. It's not that hard. You look at the Declaration of Independence, right? It says you have the ability of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that all men are created equal, right? We shouldn't be here to judge, right? That's not our job, right? What we should do to be here is, hey, are you a good person? All right, sweet. Let's move on with our work. We have to get past like making fun of different groups and stuff like that for, hey, somebody looks different than me. That's, come on. Like we need to move past that. Let's make this district, I was driving past the high school today, no home for hate. And we really need to stick to that. We need to make sure that everybody feels like they're welcome here and that they can come here, right? Because there's all kinds of people in this world, all kinds of shapes and sizes and all kinds of variety, right? We need to be able to be accepting of everybody and welcome everybody, right? And I don't think it's that much to ask to have people, and whether they're board members or just people out on the street, to be able to treat others as you would want to be treated, right? And now you could say, oh, well, if somebody isn't nice, you can't criticize them. No, because there's a standard where you're supposed to treat everybody the way you would want to be treated, right? That's the standard. And if you're failing that standard, as somebody has on this board, right, you need to be held to a higher standard. And I think this board spoke with a unified voice about, we expect everybody on this board to be held to a higher standard, to be the best of our community, right? And I can't tell you the number of people who have stopped me, reached out to me, emailed me, whatever, and said thank you. And the thank you to the other members of the board. And I know I'm not alone in this, for making sure that we're standing up against hate, and we're trying to be welcoming of everybody. It's such a simple idea. It's such a simple thing to want, to treat others the way you want to be treated, right? And that means acting with kindness and being respectful of one another. And I don't think it's a big thing to ask. And I was really glad that last week, everybody else here with me, and I'm kind of looking around, right? We were all in agreement on that. And I was proud of us for that, because I don't think our community, I don't think our staff, and most importantly, our kids deserve any less than that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Oh, Judy, I saw you that.
I just wanted to follow up on the concerns of the virtual students. So I didn't quite hear any specifics. When might we have a discussion on how to improve that? Are we going to do that at our, in 2 weeks at our next board workshop? Because each week that goes by, that it's more time that they're not maybe getting as much as they'd like. So I was kind of hoping we could nail down when we might discuss improving the hybrid program.
I'd volunteer to discuss that in the curriculum committee meeting. If it relates fully to curriculum in terms of how to improve that, I'd volunteer to have that as a top agenda item. If it's okay with the rest of the committee.
I'm okay with that. I just, hopefully we can get that feedback in a turnaround that quick, because it would be 2 weeks from now.
Even if you didn't get the feedback yet, maybe we could just talk about it.
Yeah.
Just talk about it in
that's fine.
general.
Yeah.
And maybe like what the expectations for Wednesdays are.
Sure. Yep.
Because I wrote that down too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious, like, how are we using our paraprofessionals on Wednesday? Things like that. Like, what kinds of things can we kind of institute quickly to improve their experience?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
All right. Guess I'll be attending Carrie's curriculum meeting.
We could blend it into special education and pupil services too.
That's true.
We absolutely could.
A double feature.
I'm right after you.
Okay.
A double feature.
Also, that meeting at the curriculum meeting on the 22nd, as well as the 25th, there's discussions about full-day kindergarten, which are on the horizon from the other committees as well.
Yeah.
So if we want to adjust the time and/or, like you said, have a double feature.
I think we should probably double feature.
I was going to say, so we could call kindergarten curriculum and move into pupil services for virtual if we need to, because I know you had a lot to discuss about kindergarten.
We could just have one. We could just have one link for both meetings. I mean, the same link,
yes,
and have it run through.
We could
there.
just call it the curriculum and pupil services meeting and make it go from 6 till whenever.
It's a special presentation.
Yes, double feature.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, that sounds good. Anybody else have comments?
I had
Yeah,
go
ahead, Gary.
Go ahead, Keith.
Okay, I was just going to ask the same question that Judy was asking. So when you send out the invites for the curriculum instruction, pupil services, and catch-all meeting, you might as well send it to the full board.
Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question on a comment on the gentleman mentioned following science versus magic. So there's no magic here. There's droplets that contain virus particles. Droplets are affected by gravity, so they fall at a certain rate. So there's a certain distance that when you speak, that the droplet will either evaporate or fall to the ground, right? There's no magic. It's all physics. Just like when you fly in an airplane, it's physics. So there's no magic. That's where the 6-foot distance comes from. It's how far the droplet falls. Masks catch the droplets. So there's no magic in a mask, except that it can catch a droplet. So it can't travel from me to the person I'm talking to. So that's the science that we're following. That's where the 6-foot comes from. It's not magic. It's best practices. It was started in, I believe in the 1918 flu epidemic. That was when they really did the science that said there's a 6-foot distance that you should maintain. So just for some background, if anyone's interested.
Thanks, Carrie. I think you explained that to me once before. I liked it. Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, I would call for
Motion to adjourn. Second.
I didn't think I'd have to say it. Any discussion? No. And all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
night, guys.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Oh, the board needs to stay on just for a second. If you. Carrie, why don't you call my cell phone?
Okay.